one answer for you: jobs, jobs, jobs. As a general rule, it's the role of the private sector to create jobs, and the government role is to create the condition for the private sector to create better and more jobs. And the government needs to understand why the private sector is not creating the necessary jobs, and after that, remove the constraints that prevent the private sector from creating more and better jobs. In Ethiopia context, the jobs agenda, the effort to create more and better jobs, is hindered mainly because of the poor investment climate that we have. So the reason why we want to focus on improving the investment climate is to make sure that the private sector is creating more and better jobs, one. The second thing is we want to foster more investment and also sustain the current economic growth. To sustain the current economic growth, we need to expand the role and the participation of the private sector. And to do that, we have to address all the regulatory burden that hindered the private sector from creating the necessary jobs for Ethiopia.
In terms of monetary policy, if you see how we modernized monetary policy by issuing marketable securities, the treasury market is now up and running and very vibrant. We run this market every 2 weeks, but also in terms of the banking supervision, there are a number of directives that were actually creating more obstacles than facilitating the development of the sector. So these were overhauled, improved for the better, essentially. But if you look at the critical direction where the bank is going, one is to create a more competitive banking industry, and the banking industry that should be ready for international competition, that should look beyond the borders, and that should be ready to accept any kind of competition that comes its way.
So I think there are various components to an investment climate. There is an emotional side, there is a financial side, and there's a market side. Emotionally, I think the people of Ethiopia are very welcoming, they're very friendly, they're very understanding, and they're very quick to learn new concepts, new techniques, and new styles of businesses. So it's a very versatile population that is also very welcoming and humble. At the same time, there is also the other part of a market. Ethiopia has a median age of about 19.5 years, say 20 years. So most of Ethiopia's population is 20 years. That also shows that the young population is burgeoning, it's dynamic, and it's aspirational. And an aspirational society always makes a good market.
What it means is it brings transparency and confidence into the system. So for private sector, the most important thing is knowing what laws of the land say and being aligned with the rest of the world in terms of those policies and those laws. And aligning and doing the businesses in Ethiopia, policy reform makes it much more efficient to do business in the country. But it also means that we're catching up with our peers in the rest of the region and in the rest of the world and as far as doing business, which is a clear indication of the government's commitment to developing the private sector and also encouraging investments in the country.
This remains to be an important government priority, and we want to be obsessive about cutting unnecessary cost. We are obsessive about easing the regulatory burden, and improving the investment climate will remain to be an important government agenda. I think the critical thing here is to note that improving the investment climate is not an event. It's a process, and we want to build on existing momentum and continue to address the policy, regulatory, and administrative barrier that the private sector currently faces, and create a much more improved investment climate going forward.